Star Wars The Acolyte provide a new hope for Star Wars fans? Cinema, where we focus on a film. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Acolyte. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? Or if you just skipped on it altogether and waiting for this review to help you decide if you should really see it or not. And make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you're not ready to join in film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So getting right into the positive. Overall, this is an interesting and compelling series based on the old Republic era of Star Wars, and it goes about some of the premise with going to interesting ideas that tackle ideas and themes of the ideas and political system back in the day from when Star Wars began in episode 1. And so how we're tackling those themes becomes interesting by the little notes here and there, how the Jedi look and how they work and operate and connected to the old Republic system, and just the general ideas with the Sith. You're touching on systems within there and the communities that are provided within the system and the galaxy as a whole. And so what we're getting is just a small fraction of what we could be expanding out to. And so you're not expecting too much elaborate schemes from where we're headed, but this film as a whole just goes on these two twins that become interesting and touches on a mystery that's compelling, trying to discover their backstory and how they're connected through the Force and everything that is going about discovering this witch's village and other things that go about lines of that. And it's exploring themes where there's corruption within the Jedi Order, where there's flaws within their system, and just that nature alone, it's fun to see those notes come about within different stories in general, and it's sort of evident within episode 3 and everything that pulls about within the prequels of Star Wars that it touches on those notes a little bit in some ways. And this is sort of the front central viewpoint of what we're getting out of the story. And so the story, it becomes compelling enough. It pulled me in a little bit time and time again for wanting to get on to the next episode. Even if I didn't watch the episodes from day one, I was still compelled to watch it and move on to finish the series, and it had enough substance to fulfill what I was kind of expecting out of the film. And that leads me into the mix elements, where there are certain aspects about the twins, they weren't as engaging. Certain things felt like they could be left out. A little bit of filler, where they were refreshing on certain ideas or things that the setting isn't as creative as it might have could have been. The color palette wasn't crazy colorful or elaborate by the nature of what you're getting out of these aliens, and certain things could be explored more with these new species that they're adding in, or other ideas that could have been expanded upon, especially within the realm of what's going on within the old Republic era, and things more on the Sith ideologies and the Jedi ideologies. We got some of that, but it could have been a little bit more expanded upon. But unfortunately, it was closed in mostly on the girls, which isn't a particular bad story, but what we get out of their characters aren't necessarily the most compelling. Once you get into the mystery, it's good for what you're following through, but once they start repeating notes or things get answered later on, once you don't care about those pieces of puzzles, it just has an underwhelming factor that doesn't feel fulfilled by the nature of what you're expecting of answers that flow about along the way. There's not necessarily any elaborate plot twist that can really change the game with how you're discovering the mystery. And once you're figuring out things and noting where these girls come from and how things are coming about, and certain cameos just are good enough. They don't feel like things that pull you all the way in, but you also don't want to feel too connected to the universe that makes the universe feel smaller, as some more recent shows have been doing. And so even though I can't really call it a positive, because it shouldn't be something where everything is meant to be fan service that make the universe shrink together, this does have the right notes that because it's years earlier than where we're expecting things to be, we're not expecting to see all of these familiar characters that we shouldn't because they're not born yet. And so that leads me into the negative, in which I have to say there's certain ideas or certain episodes that just feel absent of the substance that should be provided, or things that feel repeated, especially in episode 6 or 7, that sort of went on this flashback tangent that I thought it was just going to go on for a few minutes to re-engage ourselves, but it went back way to the Jedi's point of view that sort of showed some of the themes that this show is banking on, but it felt like a repeat stage of having already noted some of its ideas, but having to show it in full, even though it already sort of showed us to some extent what they were reiterating on. And so the way it engages with that, showing in only a few new details to certain plot points and going about those things to go out of the way and retell story points, just sort of lost the magic and their aspects to what the Jedi and their acting that wasn't as super engaging to how you're sucking me into the story. Nothing feels personally memorable, and even with the twin girls, even though they're part of the mystery and what you're engaging with, there wasn't a true sense of wonder to, once you find out some secrets and ideas of how they're connected to the Jedi, their backstory, and the Jedi's backstory as a whole. It's not necessarily quite such a surprise that it really redeems what you're wanting from something that once you find a resolution, you should be really relieved to find something, but it ultimately just feels plain and absent of an elaborate sense of emotion or depth to the characters that is outside of just them connected to the Force or certain ideas. And there's certain ideas with the Witch's Village that in episode 3, it goes on this weird route and makes you wonder how this is really connected to Star Wars. And it's not necessarily in the Witches of Dathomir way we've seen the Clone Wars, but it goes about this some weird ideas that for a relatively family-style show is very off-putting of what they talk about with the children, their choices and everything that's done. It doesn't elaborate too much on what the culture is based upon and how they're going about. The setting and look to it is interesting enough, but the ideas and theology behind it is not explained too well in the premise that you're trying to connect with a wider audience. And so this niche product sort of just doesn't feel like it has a sci-fi element to certain episodes or certain looks to this world as a whole, which isn't always a bad thing for what you're doing with Star Wars. It can be very elaborate, but I feel it touches on some wrong viewpoints at the wrong time. And so the way you go about this, leaving you at the end of the day with something that's not totally elaborate, doesn't have a ton of depth, and while it does engage me with some ideas and things that come about that bring in a little bit of a treat as well, it's something that by the end of the day, it wasn't engaging enough to hook me with a strong memory to really be wanting to go back to it or even think about it much again at the end of the day. And therefore, I have to rate The Acolyte as simply 5.5 out of 10. Let me know in the comments below what you think of The Acolyte. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? Does it re-engage something of your past love of Star Wars? Or are you just not feeling it with where Star Wars has been going lately? Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you're not already. Join the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all. Make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.